Welcome to episode 29 of Insights for Business Owners. This month we have Josh Greene, who is CEO of the Mather Group, which is a online business reputation firm. Josh, great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Dave. Excited to chat.
Awesome. Well, I think start at the beginning and tell us what the Mather Group does, because it's unfamiliar to a lot of people, and I think we could all learn a lot from it.
Sure. We're an online reputation management company. Basically, we help companies, organizations, and individuals with how they're found in both Google and Wikipedia. So, given the extent that everyone's relying on online resources today, it makes a lot of sense to figure out how people are finding you and what you can do about it. And certainly, I think your audience, which is oftentimes being researched as they might be thinking of purchasing or selling a business, is
Yep.
an important thing to make sure you're being portrayed the way you'd like to be portrayed online.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I'll jump right in and say something we've been searching for, and it's really great to kind of reconnect with you, is online reputation diligence. Is that something you can help with? We represent a lot of buyers of companies, and should they and can they, with your help, research the online reputation of their target?
They definitely should.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure you probably have a horror story or two,
Yeah.
um, but it's probably even more important just to use that as a filtering mechanism at the
Mm.
beginning of the process. You
Mm-hmm.
could do all sorts of deep dives, but I think when you're just entering into a process, if you're willing to take an hour of your own time, you can do a pretty good job of seeing what comes up when you're looking for
Mm-hmm.
a particular business. I mean, I would recommend
Mm.
everyone sort of start by doing it with themselves just to get a feel for it, because
Yeah.
if you search on yourself, Dave, you'll know right away whether that's an accurate representation or not.
Right.
And also, it doesn't require any complicated formulas to sort of figure out if you're going to be happy with that result or not. It's
Mm. Mm.
pretty eye of the beholder type of stuff.
Yeah. Now, should people come to you before they have a problem? Um, or just in when they have a problem? Um,
Well, it would be nice if people came to us before they had a problem, but
right.
like everything, I think we're much more reactive, and most of the
Hmm.
time we're talking to people who have a problem,
Mm.
um, and oftentimes what that means for them, I'd say that the two most common things that we hear are: there's something undesirable if you Google a company name. So
Hmm.
the SEO or the search engine results that you see when you Google a company name.
Hmm.
And then the second thing is, we have a problem with a review or some specific piece of information that's out there.
Hmm. Hmm.
So those tend to
Yeah.
be the, the two things people need help with.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. And I don't want you to reveal the special sauce, but what can you do when someone has that kind of problem? I mean, is that like just are they stuck with that forever, or are there, potential solutions?
Yeah, I mean, that's oftentimes what people think, especially starting on the second one first with any review type of situation. What
Mm.
people don't realize is almost every site that hosts reviews, whether it's for restaurants, businesses, CEOs, usually has some sort of challenge mechanism where you can
Mm.
flag a review. Um, Oftentimes, the review that people hate about themselves is violating some of the terms of service of that
Oh, wow.
business,
Oh, wow.
um, because the funny, well written ones oftentimes ignore whatever they're supposed to be doing on those sites, and
Ah,
might have inappropriate information, confidential information, is not doing
wow.
something they're not supposed to. Oh, so one
Interesting.
easy thing is oftentimes, if you can flag a particular review, you have a pretty decent chance of getting
Mm.
it either modified or taken down.
Wow.
And then the other thing people often overlook is, especially if you're a niche type of business,
Hmm.
there may only be one or two reviews out there about you, which is
Yeah.
going to give anything a disproportionate impact. So oftentimes getting a few friendly reviews can boost your
Mm,
star ranking a bit, or push down the negative result, or at least present a more balanced picture of your business.
mm. That's really interesting. I mean, so I'm a little surprised that the large companies, say Google or any of these others, you can reach them and and challenge things, because sometimes it can be so difficult, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
the interesting thing with a lot of it, for better or worse, is that it's sort of algorithmic, where
mm,
getting in touch with an actual person is difficult.
mm,
But if you sort of flood the zone and have three or four or five people submit a complaint about a review, that
hmm.
algorithm somewhere on the back end is either going, well, this isn't worth the trouble to have this review, or we'll bump it up a level to someone, to an actual person
Wow.
to look at.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so there's definitely an element of thinking about how the system works. But
Right.
you're right.
Right.
You're probably not going to get a Google rep on the phone to adjust something for you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting. And then tell me about Wikipedia, because I'm fascinated that you're able to help with that, and I've never totally understood exactly how it like aggregates information. You know.
Yeah, and we have tons of resources on our website, recorded webinars. I did a book on Wikipedia.
Wow.
There's there's a lot there, but the main thing with Wikipedia is there are probably 20 to 30,000 very active volunteer editors, all
Wow.
working on different areas of interest to them.
Wow.
So if you think of that as a little bit of a social network behind the scenes,
Hmm.
curating information, arguing about information, you start to get a sense of how things come together. And a lot of
Mm,
the information you see on Wikipedia is the result of a number of people debating over time, what the most accurate information is, what the most accurate sources are,
mm.
all of that sort of things. And
Wow.
that's um, so it's a lot more challenging sometimes than it seems like it should be.
Right.
If you just have one piece of information you want to update, um, it can seem like a whole lot of headache for something, because of all these rules that, if it's your first time actually trying to do something in Wikipedia,
Mm.
you may not be aware of and inadvertently violate.
Oh, wow. So, do the volunteers make decisions about like what will be posted on a page?
They do, and the
Okay.
tricky part is anyone can theoretically edit any page. So
Oh, really?
oftentimes there'll be an argument going on in the background about whether an
Wow.
edit's good or bad, or whether it should be reverted. Um,
Wow.
and some editors have a bit more say than other editors.
Wow.
So
Interesting.
it can get very contentious. There's a view history button on any Wikipedia page up in the top, and
I
if
didn't
you
know that.
click on it, if you pick your favorite topic that attracts a lot of attention, you'll probably see edits being made on a daily or hourly basis as people,
Wow.
sort of debate that. On the flip
Wow.
side, there are plenty of business to business companies I know of that haven't had an update on their page in 6 months,
Mm.
just because there either is no news, or more likely there aren't a lot of volunteer Wikipedia editors dying to update a B2B SaaS platform Wikipedia page.
Right. Fascinating. Wow. That's really interesting. And so it's not like a committee that decides, or like there's ranked volunteers, or
I
yeah.
mean, there are various committees.
Yeah.
You
Wow.
can sort of move up in the ranks to an administrator status eventually, which provides some more
Wow.
capabilities.
Yeah.
In some ways, it's like building up your street cred as an editor, gives you more ability to do different things,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
versus someone who just shows up and does their first edit at somewhere to say that Microsoft is a great company. That edit's
Right.
probably going to disappear almost immediately.
Makes sense. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I guess from a marketing, like flipping on the other side, from a marketing standpoint, how important is a Wikipedia page?
Well, it plays a big role in SEO. It's going to
Oh,
show up
really?
in the top 3 results in Google most of the time for just about anything.
Really?
And
Wow.
it's the number 2 source of information for all these large language models that are powering AI. So if you,
Wow.
ask ChatGPT a question and then look at the sources, a large amount of the time, some of that information will be sourced from Wikipedia. So if
Wow.
you do have a Wikipedia page, it's important to pay attention to it. Um,
Right.
However, if you
Yeah.
don't, you avoid the whole scenario of your page could be edited by anyone at any time,
Right.
which, as you can imagine, also has some downsides to it.
Yeah. It's like this risk reward.
Yeah,
You'll get more exposure, but then you could also expose yourself to critique or just defamation.
yeah,
um, but I feel like that's the risk of being out there online.
yeah. Well,
Um,
I think that's a really great lead in to a little bit of the secret sauce sharing,
yeah,
which
yeah,
I think one of the things people often overlook is what Google says about them. So if you search on
mm,
the name of their company or their personal name, if they're more or less synonymous with the company,
yeah,
what people don't realize is an awful lot of those things on the front page are controllable by you. So if you
mm,
have an Instagram, a Facebook, a Twitter account, a homepage, maybe something else, all of those have a profile of you that has a couple sentences that are essentially defining you to the world. Dave
wow,
is
yeah,
a top M&A lawyer
right,
in Vermont, but maybe
yeah,
somewhere else it says Dave is a pro bowling aficionado and it's interesting, the number of companies, even big ones, where someone set up the LinkedIn profile for the company maybe a decade ago,
wow,
and no one ever really thinks to go back in and look at what it says.
right,
But that result has a lot of credibility in Google because Google knows
wow,
exactly where the LinkedIn definition of a company is. And sometimes you have this scenario where um, the interns set it up because they were like, here's this new thing, go get us a TikTok or
right,
whatever.
right, yeah, exactly,
And
yeah,
then
yeah, yeah,
no one's ever checked since then to make sure it
mm,
lines up with the story. Or companies pivot and are in a
yeah,
different area.
hmm,
And if you look at essentially your front page on the internet, what happens when someone searches on you, that's really important because that's really where people are going. Even if they only have a minute before a meeting, they're
right,
typically, doing a quick search. So that's something you definitely want to
definitely.
keep in mind as you're thinking about this.
Yeah, no, that's really, really thoughtful and helpful. I want to flip back to the Wikipedia thing real quick and the large language models. And so, what's funny about that is that I didn't realize that this brilliant AI, a lot of what they're doing is spitting out Wikipedia,
Yeah.
which is funny. But are you adjusting your business because of AI and large language model results?
We are. We're
Yeah.
seeing an increasing number of conversations where people are saying, "Hey, I'm concerned about what shows up when someone searches on me in AI because there are 5 or 6 major platforms
Right.
instead of just one Google to optimize for." So now it's sort of back to the early days of search where there are
Wow.
a bunch of LLMs. So everyone's trying to get a feel for how they're going to work, and I think in 6 months to a year, you're going to see a lot of offerings to optimize how you're showing up
Really?
in a bunch of these different engines.
Wow.
Um,
So like an SEO, there's an SEO equivalent for ChatGPT or something like yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard it called GEO for generative engine optimization or AIO
Wow.
for optimization for AI.
Yeah.
So no one's really
Wow.
figured out the name of it, but there's definitely a lot of interest in it,
Mm.
especially because people are starting to see a trickle of leads where people are saying, "Oh, I found you through ChatGPT." And that
Wow.
tends to get people very interested in what's showing up about them.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. And then, I mean, it's like a totally new frontier, but you're then having to help people uh, deal with reputation issues on these separate platforms, these separate LLM platforms.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's a multiplier of the number of places you're concerned about at this point, because it, you know,
Wow.
is it on Grok? Is it on Perplexity? Is it on
Right.
ChatGPT? Those can all have different answers. But you're seeing a lot of the companies that make SEO tools also roll out AI monitoring tools as part of their platforms to try and extend their business into this space.
Makes sense. And I wanted to ask you about the Mather Group's sort of monitoring
Mhm.
aspect. Do you do that as well? Like, do people kind of, pay you monthly to just monitor their reputation, and then something comes up, you can address it? Like, is that something you offer?
Yeah, usually that happens after an active engagement of
Mhm.
dealing with something, and then, hopefully after things settle down and you've managed the problem,
Mhm.
people often want to sort of have eyes on it for a
Yeah.
while,
Mhm.
because these things tend to go in cycles.
Mm.
Um, it's it's, as I mentioned earlier, rare that anyone shows up in advance of them having a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Right, right. Let me ask you something that's, a little personal. Like, can you also help with social media? Things like I actually was hacked on a social media account or two, and it was stressful. Is that something you even help with?
A lot of what we can do there is sort of unofficial.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of the platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, you need to know someone or
Right.
at the company, or go through another channel to get access to a higher level of help.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
so that's something that we
Mhm.
often try and figure out for people, because it
Right.
is, I'm sure you experienced, if you go in
Oh,
the front door, it can be horrible.
well, truthfully, what ended up happening with a couple of accounts was I got locked out, and I've never used them again.
Yeah.
There was no way to reach anyone. And and I'm sure you understand this. It felt so invasive. Like when someone,
Yeah.
defames you, attacks you online, what's weird is, and this is like such a funny feeling. I'm sure you can relate to this from your clients. You feel like everybody knows. Like,
Yeah.
it's out there, and all your friends and all your business contacts and everybody have seen this bad review. You can't escape it, and maybe you could talk about the psychological aspect of this, because I think it's stressful.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, people are way less observant and have way more things going on.
Right.
It's, it's the
Yeah.
center of your universe, so it's
Yeah.
maddening. It
Right.
feels very, very personal, because in
Right.
many ways it's your online identity is a
Yeah.
reputation of and a representation of you.
Totally.
And right, more people are going to see the online version of you than see the real life version of
Mm.
you, so it can
Yeah.
be, very devastating.
Yeah.
um on the other hand, it's one of those things where, if you're trying to market a product,
Yep.
um, the advice is you need repetition of something between 7 and 23 times to make
Wow.
a sale.
Wow.
And you're worried your Instagram has been hacked, and
Right.
it's a real dichotomy,
Yeah.
because it
Mhm.
feels like the end of the world.
Right.
um, and for 90-95% of the people, it is not in fact the end of the
Right.
world.
Right. Right.
But yeah, that's why it I think feels so um strongly, is basically your identity is sort of
Mm.
being messed with, versus,
Right.
if someone hacked a couple of pages on your website, that would probably mean more of the, oh, now we have a page selling pharmaceuticals from Canada. Whoops, and you'd move
Yep.
along. But yeah, the social media stuff is interesting, and why
Yeah.
I do recommend to people, the more you can do some security features if they have
Right.
them, like two-factor authentication or
Yeah.
whatever, that would be,
Definitely.
a small step towards securing things.
But it raises a good point in that when people come to you, I'm sure they feel devastated. They feel like invaded. But what's nice, and I imagine you can tell them this, is like, you can get through this. Like, there is, you know, your brand will
Yeah,
recover. I mean, maybe not always 100%, but for most of the time, I imagine.
yeah, and even if it's a big business, there's usually someone who's been dealing with the brunt of whatever the situation is. And, part of what's going on today is, the outrage cycle is so much quicker,
Yeah.
that you don't really have to sort of pause that long before you're going to be out of the spotlight,
Right.
which
Wow.
is,
Yeah.
um, which is I think the last 3 or 4 minutes have been some function of saying, well, you're probably fairly insignificant in the in the online dialogue that's out there, but there
Right.
are
Right.
hundreds of millions of people out there. So
Right.
it is,
Right.
there are people who spend 24 hours a day plotting how to get attention, and
Right. Right.
so if
That's
you're,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, um
Wow. Um, Josh, thank
so
you so much for sharing this with us. It's just fascinating. You know so much. I can tell what you're doing is so important and vital and so helpful for folks. How do people find you online? Actually, here we go. Right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So the company name is the Mather Group LLC. So you can just go to the mathergroupllc.com.
Awesome.
I'm findable on all the socials as well. We have a very active LinkedIn presence, and always happy to connect with anyone listening who might have questions about anything we've talked about.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.